The US Treasury has just issued $100 billion in short-term T-bills, so US bonds on the 4 weeks, so extremely short end of the curve. So let's dive right in. What does that actually mean? Are we monetizing the debt in order to actually indirectly print more money? So let's understand the movement. First off, we start with the actual Treasury website where we do see the official numbers. So this was recent. This was August 5th. And you see here the $100 billion in as an offering amount. So when you see the actual curve of the bond curve of the United States, you do see that this curvature here just shows everything that is related to the short term. So being curved down, that means that we have a lot of demand for this kind of security. So what is special about that? Especially those here. So the 1 month, this is exactly where Scott Bessent is focusing on and has just issued $100 billion of. So what's the deal with that? This part here is the most important one because it's as pristine as it gets in what comes to collateral, in what comes to credit creation. Banks all over the world need that security in order to lend more money or borrow money and invest in markets like the S&P 500, for example, right? So it's all about arbitrage. It's all about liquidity. This is exactly what drives the markets and also Bitcoin prices as well. So this is why it's so important for us to actually track what's going on here. And in our latest report, we did talk about that as in a monetary mechanics section, that Scott Bessent is actually kind of sculpting the yield curve, because the main idea here is that we need to issue as much debt as possible to refill the void that was created by the lack of the lack of the ability of the United States to issue more debt, because we had the debt ceiling. But now that it has been temporarily lifted, we can reissue bills. But if we do it too quickly, we create problems to the market, because we drain that liquidity that could go to the S&P 500 or Bitcoin or any other risk-on assets. They would go to those bills to refill the account of the Treasury that we call TGA, right? And this is exactly what has been happening. So because the U.S. couldn't issue any more debt, we were just draining from this account. Then it went back up because of the U.S. Tax season, and then it was just drained again. Since now we have lifted the debt ceiling, now we can reissue bills to refill this account, and we are exactly at that point of the refill. But Scott Bessent chose exactly this part here of the curve because he knows the market needs especially short-term bills in order to monetize the debt. What does that mean? So even though you drain liquidity from the market, creating a little bit of turbulence in the markets, at the same time, banks, especially banks, are the ones that can actually create more money out of it through credit. So you take that collateral, you post that collateral, you get money, and you pay interest on that, and that just expands balance sheets. So banks are actually the most powerful force for money creation, even if we have the idea that actually the Fed is doing it, or even the Treasury. So the Treasury, even though we have this image of Scott Bessent actually holding the printer, the true printer comes from the banks, because they are the most generating force, the biggest generating force for credit in the world, especially outside of the United States, where you have even more debt than inside of the United States. And that creates the whole euro-dollar system, deposits outside of the United States. And at the same time, we discussed on our report how that how that modeling of the curve is kind of a yield curve control, because even though you don't announce it as such, and Scott Bessent has actually criticized Janet Yellen, his predecessor, of doing exactly the same thing. So it's a little bit of a problem there. But he understands now that if you don't do that, you create problems with the with reputation of the U.S. debt, or the liquidity of the market to provide for true liquidity that they need. So he started with some buybacks of bad debt. So they purchased a little bit. It was just a little bit, $2 billion of its own debt. It was just at the end of the month. So, and this is exactly the opposite way. This is exactly on the long end of the curve. So you see basically Scott Bessent buying this kind of long-term debt that it cannot be really used as collateral. It's all about inflation and growth expectations. And here, it's where we at. So this here is going to be really the focus from now on, to provide liquidity, to drive the markets. And this is exactly where we're seeing. So if we see here the S&P 500, you see that the whole market is still going up. So we did have a little bit of a hiccup here because of the Friday events on job reports being maybe faked, and Trump intervened. So we're gonna have a lot of that turbulence as well. That is to be expected. I could not expect any less for 2025 at this point. And we also warned our readers, our subscribers of the report, that is exactly what we could expect. So I'm talking more about the fundamentals, even though we're going to see some turbulence ahead, because you never know what the next tweet is going to be. But still, based on the fact that he's carefully crafting that TGA refill using the right amount of bills, at the right amount, at the actual right place at the yield curve. So this can provide us some smoother procedure, so to speak. So let's wait and see about what really happens. But again, I could expect some turbulence there. But the fundamentals just show that the United States, along with China, are the true drivers of liquidity, and that's exactly what's driving the market. So the S&P 500, Bitcoin, it's still at almost at all-time high level. So let's see how things go. So this is going to be very interesting to see. If you want to follow the complete report, I also talk about China, how actually bad numbers on the real economy over there as well is going to create a lot of stimulus and liquidity injections, especially on the banking system. So you have those two pillars, so the United States and China working together, just providing that liquidity. However, many short-term events can trouble those waters. So I would see that as an opportunity for sure. So let's see what happens. And if you're interested in having access to the report, links are here on the description below as well. All right, see you in the next video.